The rain had been relentless, a gray sheet of water drenching the earth below. Eliza, her clothes tattered and her body weary, trudged along the dirt road, each step sinking into the mud. Her hands cradled the small life growing within her, a constant reminder of the fragility of the world she was now a part of. She hadn't meant for things to go this way. The dreams of a happy family, of a house filled with love, felt so distant now, like a memory from another life. With nowhere else to turn, Eliza had found herself in a barn on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, but it was shelter, something she hadn't had for weeks. The barn smelled of old hay and wood, the air thick with dust that seemed to cling to her skin, making her feel even more alone. It was a far cry from the warm homes she'd once known, the one she'd passed as a child on her way to school, envying the neat fences and the sound of laughter spilling out of open windows. Now, the world seemed quieter, colder. She sat in the corner of the barn, huddled under a thin blanket she'd found abandoned by a nearby shed. Her knees were pulled up to her chest, her head resting against them, her eyes staring at the cracked floorboards beneath her. Every breath she took felt like a struggle, each movement like a reminder that the world had forgotten her. The barn was her only refuge now, and even it felt uncertain, as though the walls were about to close in on her. As the wind howled outside, she could hear the creaking of the barn's old timbers, the sound of nature pressing in. The distant thunder made the ground shake beneath her, but Eliza barely moved. She had grown used to the isolation. It wasn't the first time she had been alone in the world, but this time felt different. This time she carried the weight of another life, a tiny heart that beat in rhythm with her own. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly, fingers brushing against the gentle curve of her pregnancy. There was a softness to it now, a quiet warmth, but in her heart there was only fear. Fear of what was to come, fear of the unknown. The world was already so harsh, so unforgiving. Would it be any kinder to the child she carried? With a deep breath, she closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of peace. She needed sleep, but her body felt like it was betraying her. She hadn't eaten much in days. Her stomach growled quietly, but the hunger was familiar now. It had been a companion on her journey for longer than she cared to admit. The darkness crept in, and soon the only sound was the steady rhythm of the rain. Eliza curled deeper into the corner, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders, hoping for a moment of respite. But there was no escape from the thoughts that clouded her mind, no solace from the life that had been ripped from her. Her eyes fluttered closed, and she drifted into a restless sleep. Dreams came, but they were always fleeting, filled with images of faces she'd once known, of places she'd once loved, now lost to her. The dream never stayed long enough for her to grasp it, fading into the same emptiness that had been her reality for weeks. The wind continued to howl outside, but inside the barn, the world was still. The only movement was Eliza's quiet breathing, her chest rising and falling in the dim light. Then, as if responding to her deepest despair, a soft sound reached her ears, the creak of the floorboards beneath her. Startled, she lifted her head, her eyes blinking against the darkness. The sound was faint, almost imperceptible, but there it was again. The barn seemed to shift, the floor groaning as if something was stirring beneath it. Her heart began to race, and she stood slowly, her legs unsteady from the long hours of sitting. She moved cautiously toward the source of the noise, her eyes straining to make sense of the shadows in the dim light. The rain outside intensified, tapping against the roof like 1,000 tiny fingers. But Eliza's attention was fixed on the floor. The creaking came again, louder now, followed by a faint scratching sound, like something being dragged across the floorboards. With a mixture of fear and curiosity, Eliza knelt down, her fingers brushing the rough, weathered surface of the barn floor. She pressed her ear to the wood, listening intently, and for a moment, she thought she heard a faint whisper beneath the sound of the rain. Then, in one fluid motion, she slid her fingers beneath the cracked boards, prying them open with a quiet snap. The gap revealed a small, hidden space beneath the floor. Her heart quickened, her breath shallow as she peered into the darkness, unsure of what she might find. And there, in the dim light, she saw something glinting, a small object, half buried beneath the dirt and old straw. Her hands trembled as she reached down, brushing the debris aside. As she grasped the object and pulled it free, she gasped, her breath catching in her throat. It was an old, leather-bound journal, its cover worn with age, its pages yellowed with time. The weight of it in her hands felt heavy, like the world itself had just shifted. She turned it over, staring at the faded inscription on the front. The name on the cover was unfamiliar, but it was the date that struck her: 1923. Eliza's fingers trembled as she opened the journal. The pages were filled with flowing script. The ink faded, but legible. As she read the first few lines, she felt a shiver run down her spine. The words seemed to call to her, as though they had been waiting for her to find them. The first entry was dated the day before the journal had been hidden. It spoke of loss, of a life that had been taken too soon, and of a mother's promise to leave something behind, something for the child who would one day find it. Tears welled in Eliza's eyes as she read the words, her chest tightening with emotion. There, under the floorboards of the barn, she had found something more than just an old journal. She had found a piece of herself. The weight of it settled over her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt something stir within her hope. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning to understanding, to something deeper. The journal was a bridge to a past she had never known, and Eliza knew in that moment that she couldn't turn away from it. The pages of the journal held answers to questions she hadn't even known she was asking. And she would read them all. The rain continued its relentless tap against the barn, now softened to a gentle whisper. Eliza sat on the cold floor, the leather-bound journal resting in her lap, her hands holding the pages with reverence. The weight of the book, its hidden history, pressed into her thoughts, its presence stirring something deep within her, a memory, a longing she couldn't yet place. The words on the pages swam before her eyes as she slowly read through them, the soft, looping script painting images in her mind. The journal told the story of a woman, a mother, who had once lived in the same town, many years before Eliza's time. The entry spoke of a life filled with quiet strength, of love lost and found, of promises made beneath the heavy weight of hardship. Each page was a testament to a life that, like hers, had been touched by struggle, by pain, but also by an enduring hope. Her thumb ran over the worn edges of the pages, and as she read, she felt herself drawn deeper into the world of this woman, whose name was Miriam. The similarities were striking. Miriam, too, had faced the harshness of life, had suffered loss, had known what it was like to feel abandoned and alone. Miriam, too, had a child on the way, though her circumstances were different. But there was something in the words, something familiar, that made Eliza feel as though the journal had been waiting for her all this time. There were stories of Miriam's own struggles, of how she had fought to protect her family during hard times. But there were also tales of resilience, of unexpected kindness, of the small joys that had kept her going. There were lines about a small piece of land, a patch of earth that Miriam had promised her daughter one day. The words spoke of a house that could be built, a place of safety, of belonging. It was as if Miriam, with every stroke of her pen, had known that her child would one day need the same strength, and that the story of their family, of their shared burdens and blessings, would need to be passed down. Eliza's heart ached as she read on. The promise in the journal was clear: a legacy, a gift that could help her understand her own journey. The words spoke of a place, a piece of land that Miriam had never been able to keep. The journal spoke of her hopes to return to it, of the house she planned to build, but time and circumstance had never allowed it. Miriam had hidden the journal in this very barn, perhaps in the hope that someone would find it when the time was right. A chill ran through Eliza's body. The journal had led her here, to this barn, to this very moment. She realized, with a sudden clarity, that this was no coincidence. This was not just a piece of forgotten history. It was a part of her own inheritance. The journal spoke of a house, of a place where a mother and child could rebuild, could start anew. It was not just a relic of the past. It was a beacon, a light in the darkness. Eliza's fingers trembled as she turned to the final entry. Miriam had written of her plans to return to the house, to make it a home, for her daughter, for her family. But there was no mention of what had happened to that house. Had Miriam ever found it? Had she managed to rebuild? Eliza's mind raced with questions, each more urgent than the last. The rain continued outside, but Eliza could hardly hear it now. The world had narrowed down to the pages in front of her, to the weight of Miriam's legacy. The journal was her inheritance, but it was more than that. It was a map, a guide to something Eliza had never known she needed. She had come to this barn broken, alone, desperate for answers. And now, in the quiet stillness, the journal had offered her a path. She had always thought of herself as an orphan, someone with no history, no legacy. But now, with the journal in her hands, she felt connected to something greater, something that had come before her and would live on after her. The next morning, after a long, restless night filled with dreams of the house, the land, and Miriam's promises, Eliza made a decision. She would follow the journal. She would find this house, this land, and see if it could become the place of healing that Miriam had dreamed of. She would no longer allow herself to feel lost. The past had a voice, and it was calling her forward. Eliza spent the next few days poring over the journal, marking the places Miriam had described. The directions were vague, written with the knowledge that time had a way of erasing the small details, but they were enough. Eliza's determination grew with each passing hour. She had always known she was meant for something more than the life she had been living, and now, this journal had given her a purpose, a direction. The journey to find the house would not be easy. There would be obstacles, challenges, and she wasn't sure how she would manage them all, especially with the baby growing inside her. But something deep inside her stirred with a strength she hadn't known was there. She had been given this gift, this legacy, and she would honor it. The morning was quiet when she left the barn, the rain having stopped, leaving behind a fresh, clean scent in the air. Her feet were unsteady at first, the journey ahead of her feeling like an impossible task. But with each step, something shifted within her. She was no longer the girl who had stumbled into the barn, with no hope. Now, she was a woman on a mission, and she would not stop until she had found the place that Miriam had spoken of, the place that had been waiting for her all along. As Eliza made her way through the town, her thoughts turned to Miriam. What had she been like? Had she ever known the kind of pain Eliza had felt, the kind of emptiness that came from losing everything? Eliza hoped that by finding this house, she would finally understand the strength it took to keep going, to rebuild after everything had fallen apart. But she also knew one thing for certain. She could not face the journey alone. As much as Miriam's words had guided her, she needed something more, someone to help her understand what it meant to be a mother, to build a future out of the ashes of the past. And so, with the journal pressed against her chest, Eliza took her first steps toward the future. The path ahead was uncertain, but the legacy she carried would guide her. Eliza's journey was slow, the weight of her pregnancy making each step heavier, each mile longer. Her feet, though calloused from the hardships of her past, ached with the burden of what lay ahead. The road was rough, filled with sharp rocks and thick mud that clung to her boots as though the earth itself wanted to pull her down. But she pressed on, the journal still clutched tightly to her chest, its weight both a comfort and a reminder of what she had to do. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the road, Eliza found herself at the edge of a small village. The houses were simple but well kept, their chimneys curling plumes of smoke into the cold evening air. It wasn't much, but it was the first sign of civilization she had seen in days. She could hear the sounds of people speaking in the distance, children laughing, the low murmur of voices rising from an inn tucked in the corner of the square. She hesitated, unsure whether she should stop. Her heart ached with uncertainty, her mind still tangled in the questions the journal had raised. It was then that she saw him. He was standing by the edge of the village square, leaning against a rough-hewn fence as if he had been waiting for her. He was older than Eliza, perhaps in his mid-40s, with the rugged appearance of someone who had spent his life working with his hands. His hair, peppered with gray, was tousled, and his face was weathered, as though it had been shaped by years of wind and sun. He wore a worn coat, the fabric faded but strong, and his eyes, a deep, searching blue, seemed to see right through her. Eliza took a step back, instinctively pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. She didn't trust easily, not after all she had been through, and the idea of speaking to a stranger filled her with unease. But there was something about him, an unspoken understanding in the way he watched her, as though he knew exactly who she was, what she needed, even before she did. "Need help, miss?" His sighed. Voice was deep but kind, rough around the edges, as though it had been softened by years of use, but still carried the authority of someone used to giving orders. Eliza paused, her hand tightening around the journal. The warmth in his voice felt unfamiliar, like a promise of something safer, something more comforting than what she had known for so long. She hesitated before answering, her mind racing through the possibilities. What did he want? What did he know? "I'm looking for something," Eliza said quietly, her words unsure but steady. She didn't want to say too much, didn't want to let him know how lost she truly felt. But there was a part of her that felt compelled to speak, to explain why she was here, even if just to make sense of it for herself. The man's eyes softened, and he straightened, his posture shifting from casual to something more focused, more attuned to her. "I can see that. You're not from around here, are you?" "No," Eliza replied, shaking her head. "I'm looking for something. A house. A piece of land. It's hard to explain. I don't know exactly where it is, but I think it's close." The man regarded her for a moment, his gaze steady and calculating, as though weighing her words carefully. "You're not the first one to ask about that place," he said, his voice lowering slightly, as if the words were meant only for her. "I know the house you're talking about. It's been a long time since anyone's looked for it. You'd be the first in many years." Eliza's heart skipped, her breath hitched in her throat. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected anyone to know anything about the house, about Miriam's legacy. "You know about it?" "I do," he said, his voice even, but with a trace of something else in it, something that felt like sorrow or regret, but she couldn't be sure. He took a step closer, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. "The house is old, abandoned for decades. No one's lived there for a long time. But I've heard stories. People say it's cursed, that it's better left alone." Eliza's chest tightened. She hadn't come this far to be deterred by superstitions or whispers. "I'm not afraid," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the flutter of fear in her stomach. "I have to find it." The man studied her for a long moment before nodding, as if he had already made up his mind about her. "I can help you," he said, "but it won't be easy. There's a road out of the village, winding through the woods. Follow it for a few miles, and you'll come to a creek. The house is past that, deep in the forest. There's no map, no signs, just the trail." Eliza felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was quickly replaced by a gnawing unease. "What's the catch?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She had learned long ago that nothing in this world came without a price. The man seemed to hesitate, the moments stretching out between them. He looked at her with a mixture of pity and understanding. "The catch," he said slowly, "is that some things are meant to be left alone. The house may hold more than you're prepared for. It has a way of revealing things people aren't always ready to face." His words hung in the air, thick with meaning. Eliza's stomach clenched, but she didn't flinch. She had come too far to turn back now. She was close, closer than she'd ever been to the answers she had been searching for. "I'm ready," she said firmly, her voice unwavering. "I have to know." The man studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. "All right, follow the trail I've told you about, but be careful. Don't trust everything you see there. Some things aren't what they seem." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the evening mist that had begun to rise from the ground. Eliza stood there, her heart pounding in her chest. The journal pressed against her, its leather still warm from her hands. She didn't know what awaited her at the end of the trail, or what she would find when she reached the house. But she knew this: she couldn't stop now. The answers were out there, waiting for her, and she would find them, no matter the cost. Eliza followed the path that the stranger had described, her feet crunching softly on the gravel road. The air had grown colder, the sun slipping lower in the sky, casting the world in long, shifting shadows. The village seemed distant now, the quiet hum of daily life replaced by the oppressive silence of the woods that surrounded her. The road wound deeper into the forest, and with every step, the weight of the journal in her hands grew heavier. Her thoughts drifted back to Miriam, the woman whose legacy she was chasing. The journal had revealed so much, yet so little. Miriam's words were filled with dreams, dreams of a life that had never come to be, of a house that had remained just a dream. Eliza's heart swelled with both hope and sorrow. Could she truly bring Miriam's dream to life? Could she rebuild what had been lost? The trees pressed close around her, their branches reaching overhead like twisted fingers, their bark rough and dark. The ground beneath her feet was uneven, tangled with roots and thick undergrowth. Eliza's steps faltered as she stumbled, but she quickly regained her footing. She was determined to keep moving forward. After what seemed like hours, the woods began to thin, and Eliza found herself standing before a creek, its water rushing swiftly over smooth stones. The sound of the water, so close and clear, was soothing, almost like a promise. She crossed the creek carefully, the cool water brushing against her boots, the chill biting at her skin. On the other side, the path narrowed again, leading into an even denser patch of forest. Her breath came faster now, the tension in the air palpable, as though something were waiting for her, something that had been hidden for far too long. As she walked, the trees seemed to grow taller, their trunks thicker, and the air grew dense with the scent of damp earth. There was a stillness here that felt unnatural, a quiet that pressed against her ears. She could feel the weight of the past on her shoulders, the burden of Miriam's unfulfilled dreams, the hope that she would find something more than just an abandoned house. The path twisted and turned, the landscape unfolding like a story that had been waiting to be told. And then, at last, Eliza saw it. The house stood before her, its silhouette barely visible through the thick trees, a shadow against the fading light. It was larger than she had expected, its worn exterior a testament to years of neglect. The roof sagged in places, and the windows were dark, as though no one had lived there for decades. Yet, there was something about it, something that drew her in, something that made her feel as though she had found the place she was meant to be. She approached cautiously, her heart thudding in her chest. The front door, though cracked and chipped, stood slightly ajar. The house seemed to breathe in the quiet, its old timbers groaning in the breeze. Eliza stepped forward, her foot landing softly on the porch, the wood creaking under her weight. She paused, feeling the pulse of anticipation surge through her veins. The house was like a breath held in time, waiting for someone to unlock its secrets. As she entered, the air inside was musty, the dust settling over everything like a forgotten memory. The floorboards beneath her feet creaked with every step, but she didn't flinch. This was her place. Now this was where Miriam's legacy had led her. The walls, though worn and faded, seemed to hold the echoes of lives once lived here. Eliza could almost feel the presence of the family that had once called this place home, the laughter, the sorrow, the love that had been shared in these rooms. She could almost hear the whispers of Miriam, of the promises she had made and the life she had dreamed of. She moved from room to room, each one more decayed than the last. The kitchen, once warm with the scent of meals cooked with love, was empty now, save for the broken remains of an old stove and faded cupboards. The living room, where families had gathered to share stories and dreams, was nothing more than an empty space, its furniture long gone. But as she ventured deeper into the house, something caught her eye. A narrow staircase at the far end of the hall led up to a second floor, its steps steep and covered in layers of dust. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. She had to go up. She had to see what lay above. With her hand resting on the banister, she climbed the stairs carefully, her footsteps soft against the old wood. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper as she reached the top. The hallway was dim, with only slivers of light piercing through the grime-covered windows. She hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest, before she stepped forward. At the end of the hall, a door stood slightly ajar, the dim light from the hallway spilling into the room. Eliza approached slowly, her hand trembling as she pushed the door open. Inside, the room was bathed in an eerie glow, the sunlight from the windows casting long, angular shadows across the worn floorboards. It was a small bedroom, simple and untouched by time. The furniture, though old and faded, was intact, as if the room had been left in a hurry. But what caught Eliza's attention was the bed, covered in a quilt. The quilt was the most striking thing in the room. Its fabric was rich with color, deep reds, blues, and soft golds, arranged in a pattern that seemed familiar. The design was intricate, almost delicate, as though each stitch had been made with love, with care. Eliza stepped forward, her fingers brushing the edge of the quilt, her heart thudding in her chest. As her fingers traced the fabric, something caught her eye. Beneath the quilt, beneath the mattress, was a small wooden box. Her breath hitched. She knelt beside the bed, lifting the box carefully, as though it might break with the slightest touch. She opened it slowly, her eyes widening as she saw what was inside. It was another journal, similar to the one she had found in the barn, but this one was even older, its leather cracked and worn with age. Eliza's fingers trembled as she pulled it out, her mind racing. What had Miriam left behind? What had she hidden here, in this room, waiting for Eliza to find it? She opened the journal carefully, the pages fragile under her touch. The first few entries were familiar Miriam's words, her hopes, her dreams. But then, something shifted. There, on the last page, was something Eliza hadn't expected. It was a letter, addressed to her. "Dearest child," it began, "by the time you find this, you will have come far. The road you are about to walk will not be easy, but it is the one that leads to your true home. Remember that you are never truly alone, and that the strength you seek is within you. This house, this land, is not just a place. It is a legacy, a gift that has been passed down through the generations. But it is also your choice to make it your own." Eliza's breath caught in her throat. Her heart swelled with emotion as she read the words, the weight of Miriam's love and wisdom wrapping around her like a warm embrace. The house, the land, everything had been waiting for her, for this moment. The legacy had been passed down, not just in the journal or the quilt, but in the very earth beneath her feet. Eliza had found more than just a house. She had found a home. The morning after Eliza's discovery, the sun rose pale and distant, struggling against the heavy clouds that loomed over the house. The quiet was unsettling, the stillness broken only by the occasional rustle of wind in the trees. Outside, Eliza sat by the small window in the upstairs room, her eyes focused on the land that stretched out before her. The house was hers, now the weight of Miriam's legacy, of the promises woven into the fabric of the journals, pressing down on her with every passing moment. She had spent the night in the room with the quilt, reading the letter over and over again, trying to make sense of Miriam's words. There was so much to take in. The house, the land, the inheritance. It was more than Eliza had ever imagined. But there was something else, something unspoken, lingering beneath the surface, like a shadow she couldn't shake. The journal had spoken of a future, of a new beginning, of a family that could be rebuilt here. But as Eliza gazed out at the overgrown fields, the silence of the house settled deep within her. She was alone. She had always been alone. Miriam's dreams, though beautiful and full of hope, couldn't change that. She could rebuild, but could she really make this place a home? Could she find the strength to carry on, to give life to the dreams that had been left behind? A shiver ran down her spine. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the unease that gnawed at her. The weight of the house, the expectations, the memories seemed to be pressing down on her, suffocating her. It felt like the walls were closing in, the past rising up to claim her as its own. As she descended the stairs into the kitchen, the dim light cast long shadows on the cracked tiles. She moved mechanically, the motions familiar but distant. Her hand reached for the old kettle, her fingers brushing the cold metal. The house had a way of making her feel like an intruder, as though she didn't belong in the very space that Miriam had created with so much love. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through her lower back, making her gasp. She stopped, clutching the counter for support, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The pain spread across her abdomen, sharp and sudden, a reminder of the child she carried. Panic surged in her chest, her heart pounding. She had been here for days, thinking she was safe, thinking she could breathe again. But now, it felt like the world was collapsing around her. She sank to the floor, her hand pressed to her belly, her face pale. The pain intensified, and for a moment, everything blurred. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. Her mind raced, but there was only one thought that kept repeating itself. I'm alone, and I don't know what to do. The house felt colder now, its silence oppressive, its shadows deepening around her. She wanted to call out, to scream, but the only sound that filled the room was the sharp rhythm of her breath, the echo of her own fear. There was no one here. There was no one to help her, no one to guide her, to hold her hand and tell her that everything would be okay. For a long moment, Eliza stayed where she was, her back pressed against the floor, her body trembling. The pain continued to ripple through her, relentless and unforgiving. She had come here looking for hope, for a new beginning, but now all she felt was the weight of the past and the fear of the future. The minutes stretched into hours, or maybe just seconds. Time seemed to have lost its meaning. The only thing that anchored her to the present was the child inside her, the tiny heart beating in time with her own. The silence of the house was unbearable. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she fumbled for the screen. She tried to call for help, but there was no signal. The world outside was so far away now, and this house that she had thought would heal her, had only drawn her deeper into the isolation she had tried to escape. Her breathing slowed as the pain finally began to ebb, leaving behind a dull ache. Eliza closed her eyes, the tears finally slipping down her cheeks. She had thought she could handle this, that she could find the strength to carry on, but now, with the house around her and the baby growing inside her, she wasn't sure if she had the strength to continue. The realization hit her hard, like a blow to the chest. This place, this house, this land, it was more than just a home. It was a symbol of everything she had lost, of everything she had never had. She had come here to rebuild, to find something to hold on to, but now it seemed as if the house was a trap, a reminder of everything that had been broken, everything she couldn't fix. The world outside seemed so far away, and the shadows in the house seemed to stretch longer, darker, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Eliza felt suffocated by the weight of her own fear. The house had become a mirror of her soul, reflecting every crack, every fracture, every part of her that was still broken. But it was the baby, the child, that kept her going, that kept her tethered to something more than just the past. She couldn't give up. She couldn't turn away now. Eliza pushed herself to her feet, her body protesting, her mind clouded with doubt. She knew she couldn't stay here forever, couldn't let this house swallow her whole. She needed help. She needed someone to remind her that she was not alone, that there was still hope. As she stumbled toward the door, the pain flared up again, sharper this time, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. She had to keep moving, keep pushing forward. The house might have broken her for a moment, but it wouldn't define her. She was more than that. She was the mother of the child she carried, and she would fight for her. With trembling hands, she pulled open the door and stepped into the fading light of the evening. The world outside was still there, waiting for her to find the strength to take the next step. The house behind her stood silent, its shadow stretching long across the land. But Eliza knew it wasn't the house that would define her. It was her. The evening air was thick with the promise of rain as Eliza stepped away from the house. Her legs were unsteady, her body bruised from both the physical and emotional toll of the last few days. She walked in the direction of the woods, the path barely visible under the thick canopy of trees. The weight of the child inside her, the pain she had just endured, and the uncertainty of her situation pressed down on her with every step. Her breath came in shallow bursts, her chest tight, but she moved forward anyway. The house loomed behind her, a dark silhouette against the fading light of the sky. It felt like a distant memory already, as though the house had been part of a dream she had no hope of waking from. The promise of it had drawn her here. The words in the journal had filled her with a hope she hadn't dared to feel in years. Yet, standing there now, looking back at the place where Miriam's legacy had been hidden, Eliza couldn't escape the feeling that it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to simply find a place to call home. It wasn't enough to try to rebuild what had already been broken so many times. As she walked, her hand instinctively went to her belly. The baby stirred within her, a gentle reminder that she wasn't truly alone. She wasn't sure how she had made it this far, how she had survived the endless nights of uncertainty, the days filled with doubt and fear. But she had, and now, she had a choice. She could return to the house, to the legacy that Miriam had left behind, and try to make something of it. Or she could leave it all behind, take the journal, and seek something new, something different. The crunch of leaves beneath her feet echoed in the quiet woods, the only sound in the stillness. She stopped at the edge of the forest, looking out at the open field that stretched before her, bathed in the soft light of the dying sun. There was a path there, one that had been hidden for so long, a path that led somewhere, but where? It was the choice that had always been hers, the one that she hadn't fully understood until now. The house, the land, the legacy, it was all part of her story, but it wasn't her story alone. Miriam's dreams, her hopes for the future, had been woven into the fabric of the house, into the very land beneath her feet, but they weren't hers to carry alone. They never had been. And it was up to Eliza to decide if she would carry them forward or leave them behind. The wind picked up, the first gusts of an approaching storm whispering through the trees. The air smelled of rain, fresh and clean, but it also carried a deeper scent, the smell of the earth, of roots growing deep in the soil, of life unfolding in the most unexpected ways. Eliza closed her eyes, feeling the wind on her skin, letting it cool the heat rising in her chest. She thought of Miriam, of the woman who had left behind a life full of dreams and promises. But she also thought of herself, of the dreams she had yet to discover, of the future she had yet to build. Miriam's legacy was a gift, but it was not a burden she had to carry alone. The decision was hers, and hers alone. She could stay, could try to bring life to the house, could honor the past and make it her own. Or she could walk away, step into the unknown, and build something from the ground up. But what if neither path felt like the right one? What if the answer wasn't in staying or leaving, but in something entirely different? Her thoughts turned inward, to the small life growing inside her, the baby. It had always been the baby that had kept her moving forward, the child who had filled the empty spaces within her heart. And it was for the baby, for the future, that Eliza had to make this choice. She couldn't do it alone. She had to decide who she wanted to be, the woman who clung to the past or the one who would break free and carve out her own future. As the wind howled through the trees, Eliza felt a shift within her. She had already come this far. She had already made it through so much. There was no going back now. But there was something else, something important that she had realized in the quiet of the house. The house was just that, a house. It was a structure, a place to shelter her body, but it could never be the source of her strength. That strength came from within, from the choices she made, from the love she would give her child, from the life she would build, no matter how uncertain the path ahead might be. With a deep breath, Eliza made her decision. She would return to the house, yes, but not to be trapped by it, not to live in its shadow. She would take what Miriam had left her and build upon it. She would create a home, not just for herself, but for the future she was carrying within her. She would honor the legacy of the past, but she would not be bound by it. The house was just a beginning. Her real work was still ahead. The storm began to break, the first raindrops falling gently on her skin. Eliza turned back toward the house, her steps steady and sure. The past and the future were both part of her, and now, more than ever, she knew that she could face whatever came next. With each step, the weight of her choice lifted. She wasn't turning her back on Miriam's legacy. She was making it her own. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the air crisp and the ground heavy with the weight of rain-soaked earth. Eliza stood at the threshold of the house once again, the wooden door creaking as she pushed it open. This time, it felt different. The house, once a symbol of isolation and fear, now seemed full of possibility. The walls that had once felt like they were closing in on her now felt like the foundation of something new. The first light of dawn filtered through the grime-covered windows, casting soft rays of gold across the rooms. The dust that had settled everywhere now seemed to glow in the quiet light, as though the house itself was waking from a long, restless sleep. Eliza stepped across the threshold, her hand on her belly, her heart steady with the certainty of what lay ahead. The decision she had made to stay, to claim this place as her own, filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. The past had its place, but now it was time to shape the future. She had come to this house to rebuild, to honor Miriam's dreams, but more than that, she had come to reclaim her own dreams. Dreams of a home filled with warmth, with love, with life. She moved from room to room, her hands brushing the walls as if she could feel the echoes of Miriam's life there. Each room held a memory, a piece of history that she would not erase. But she wouldn't be defined by the past, either. She was the one who would make this place live again. She was the one who would breathe life into it. Her steps echoed through the house, but this time, the sound felt like something new, a beginning. The creaking of the floorboards was no longer a reminder of decay. It was a song of revival, of life returning to a place long forgotten. As she moved, she gathered her thoughts, her heart swelling with a quiet, growing strength. Outside, the earth had started to dry, the sun now rising higher in the sky, its rays piercing through the trees. She could hear the sound of birds calling in the distance, the rustle of leaves in the gentle morning breeze. The world had come alive again, and so had she. Eliza paused in the middle of the room, her hand resting on her stomach. The baby moved within her, a soft flutter against her skin. She smiled, her heart swelling with love. There was so much she didn't know, so much that still frightened her, but for the first time, she felt the weight of the unknown, not as a burden, but as a gift. She walked toward the kitchen, the room that had once felt so empty, so cold. Now, as the light poured through the windows, it seemed to glow with the promise of meals shared, of laughter filling the air, of moments of warmth and joy. She opened the cupboard doors, her fingers tracing the worn wood, imagining what it would be like to cook here, to share a meal with the family she would build. The sound of the kettle whistling in the corner brought her back to the present. She had work to do, things to prepare, But the work didn't feel overwhelming now. It felt like a new chapter, one she was eager to begin. She could already see the possibilities, the house, the land, the future she would create for herself and her child. It wouldn't be easy, but she was ready, ready to face whatever came next. She spent the day cleaning, organizing, and imagining what this place would become. The rooms that had once been empty and neglected were now filled with possibilities. She could already see the nursery, simple but cozy, the soft glow of a lamp casting shadows on the walls, the crib standing near the window. The kitchen would be bustling with warmth and the scent of food, and the living room would be filled with the sound of music, of stories shared, of a family gathered around the hearth. As the evening drew near, Eliza sat on the porch, looking out at the land before her. The house stood behind her, solid and steady, its walls now a part of her. The baby stirred gently inside her, and Eliza's hand rested once more on her belly. There was so much left to do, so much still uncertain, but she no longer felt alone. She no longer felt lost. The world around her had changed, and so had she. The weight of the past had lifted, and she had found her place in it. This house, this land, was no longer just a legacy from a long-gone mother. It was hers. She had claimed it, and in doing so, she had claimed her future. The journey had been long, filled with pain, fear, and doubt. But it had brought her to this moment. The house was full of life once more, and so was she. The sun had set by the time Eliza stood at the edge of the porch, looking out at the horizon. The sky had turned a deep blue, the stars beginning to twinkle above her. The world felt vast, the possibilities endless. She could still hear the faint rustle of the wind in the trees, the whispers of the past lingering in the air. But now, they were no longer haunting. They were comforting, like the soft hum of a lullaby. A deep, steady breath filled her lungs as she closed her eyes. The house, the land, the future, it was all within her grasp now. She had built it. She had brought it back to life. And in the process, she had found herself. As the first stars began to shine in the darkening sky, Eliza spoke quietly to the night, to the memory of Miriam, to the child inside her. I'll make it a home for you. And with those words, she turned back toward the house, the doors open wide, waiting for her to step inside. The days that followed were filled with small, steady changes, the kind that whispered in the quiet corners of the house and slowly crept into Eliza's heart. The once neglected rooms were now filled with life, the creaking floorboards and drafty windows becoming a backdrop for new memories being made. Every task she undertook felt like a testament to the strength she had found, the strength she hadn't known she possessed until this moment. The house that had been a symbol of isolation and abandonment now stood as a symbol of renewal, of resilience. Eliza had poured herself into it, her sweat, her determination, her hope. Every brushstroke on the walls, every nail she hammered into place, was a declaration that she would not be bound by the past. The house, with all its flaws and imperfections, was becoming hers, just as she was becoming the woman she was meant to be. The quilt Miriam had left behind found its place on the bed, its faded but intricate patterns draping across the mattress, a bridge between the past and the future. Eliza had laid it there, with careful hands, and each night, as she lay beneath it, she felt as though Miriam were still with her, not in a haunting, painful way, but in a way that felt like comfort, like guidance. The land, too, began to shift under Eliza's touch. She planted flowers in the garden, their colors vibrant against the backdrop of the still dying winter. The earth was cold, but it was waking, slowly, gently, just as Eliza was. The promise of spring was in the air, and with it, the promise of a new life, a life that would be her own, but one that would always carry the traces of the past. One afternoon, as Eliza sat on the porch watching the sun dip low in the sky, her mind wandered back to the stranger in the village, the one who had given her directions to this house. He had warned her about the weight of the place, the stories it carried with it, He had said that the house had a way of revealing things people weren't always ready to face. But Eliza had learned something else. The house didn't reveal what she wasn't ready to face. It revealed what she needed to see, to understand. It showed her that the past wasn't something to be feared, something to be left behind. It was something to honor, to carry forward, to learn from. Her hand rested on her belly as she watched the wind stir the leaves in the trees, the shadows lengthening as dusk settled in. The child inside her kicked, a gentle reminder of the future that awaited them both. It wasn't just her future that she was building now. It was a future for her child, a future where love would grow, where the shadows of the past would not dictate their lives. The storm had passed, and the sun was setting, but it wasn't the end. It was a beginning. The house was a legacy, yes, but it was also a place of new beginnings, a place where Eliza could finally make peace with the past and step into the life she had always dreamed of. In the distance, the faint outline of a figure appeared. On the horizon, Eliza squinted, her breath catching in her throat. It was the stranger from the village, his figure small against the vast expanse of the land. He walked toward her, slow and deliberate, as though he had been waiting for this moment too. When he reached the porch, he stopped and looked at her with an unreadable expression, as if measuring the change in her. Eliza didn't say anything at first. She didn't need to. They both knew what this moment was. It was the quiet acknowledgement of the journey she had undertaken, the transformation she had experienced. "Looks like you've made something of it," the stranger said finally, his voice low and steady. Eliza nodded, her hand still resting on her belly. "I've made it my own." He regarded her for a long moment before speaking again. Miriam would be proud. The words, simple as they were, struck her deep in her chest. Miriam's legacy was not just about the house or the land. It was about the strength that had been passed down through generations, about the love that had endured beyond time and circumstance. It was about the way she had carried her own burdens, and now Eliza, in turn, carried them forward. "Thank you," Eliza whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She didn't know if the stranger knew just how much his words meant to her. "For guiding me here, for helping me find what I was looking for." He smiled, a small but knowing smile, and turned to leave. But before he stepped away, he paused. "You're not alone, you know," he said, his back still turned to her. "Not anymore." And with that, he walked away, disappearing into the distance, leaving Eliza standing on the porch, her heart full. As the night deepened, the first stars began to appear in the sky, their light steady and eternal. Eliza stood in the doorway of the house, the warmth of the evening wrapping around her like a soft embrace. She could feel Miriam's presence here, could feel the history of the house woven into her very soul. But more than that, she could feel herself, the woman she had become, the mother she would be, the strength she had found within her. She wasn't just the woman who had inherited this house. She was the woman who had made it her own. She was the one who had breathed life into it, who had built something from nothing. She was a mother, a creator, a survivor. As she stepped inside and closed the door behind her, Eliza knew that the legacy of this house, of Miriam, of the generations before her, would live on. Not in the walls or the land, but in her child, in the life she had created. And as she looked out the window one last time, she whispered to the night, to the stars above, and to the memory of Miriam, "We'll make it. Together." And with that, Eliza turned away from the window and embraced the quiet of the house. The legacy was hers to carry forward, and she would carry it with love, with hope, and with the strength of everything that had come before her. If Eliza's journey has touched your heart, and if you believe in the power of rebirth, hope, and finding strength in the face of adversity, don't miss out on more emotional stories like this one. Whispers of the Worn Path is just one example of the transformative tales we share, stories of resilience, love, and the courage to rebuild in the most unexpected ways. By subscribing to our channel, you'll join a community that believes in the power of storytelling to heal, to inspire, and to guide us through life's most challenging moments. Whether you're looking for deep, emotional narratives or stories about strength, motherhood, and legacy, we've got something for you. Every story here is a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there's always the possibility of a new beginning. So, if you felt the pull of this story, and you want to see where Eliza's journey and others like it lead, hit that subscribe button now. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that could speak to your soul. We're here, creating and sharing stories of transformation, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey with us. Subscribe now, and let's discover the power of storytelling together.